The reason they like reading my stuff is that I've always got real life examples to prove what I'm saying.
There's a lot of good people that listen to this podcast.
Other than God and my family, deer hunting would be next in line on my list of priorities.
From the bottom of our hearts, it's just fantastic and awesome to have the support that you guys are getting.
People ask me about expandable broadheads and love swings.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to the Chasing Giants podcast with Don Higgins and Terry Peer, brought to you by Osseo Gear. Don, it is October 2nd. Opening weekends happened in October in Illinois and many other states. We have a very interesting show, as I think most people probably tuning in today would be expecting us to dive into opening weekend of hunting. But we have a great segment with you and Jay Gingrich talking about planting trees in the fall. And it's a struggle that I've had over the years of wanting to improve my habitat, but worried about the intrusion and the hunting property. We're going to dive into that in a great segment a little bit later. And we're going to talk about how both of us had pretty frustrating weeks for different reasons. It hasn't been easy, and I don't think people really understand. They say don't worry about it, but it's hard.
Yeah, well, it's opening weekend, and I haven't even set the tree yet. I've had a pretty frustrating week, but you did too. On another note, I'll let you go first because you should have a buck on the ground.
I should have a buck on the ground, people. If anybody thinks that we're trying to hide the honest, brutal truth, you're wrong. I had an unbelievable week of hunting, 2 sets, and had my target buck within bow range twice. I was actually texting, I forget, was it just you and Dwayne, I think maybe, or you, Dwayne, and Wes. Had perfect wind earlier this week, and the bucks with this temperature drop, I don't know if you've seen it with your cell camera data or not, Don, but the scrape activity has really, really picked up. And I was really disappointed when my target buck came out almost 300 yards away. But he started working a scrape line coming to me. And I have one rope scrape that's been on this farm for about 5 years. And every deer on the farm hits this rope scrape. And it was on the other side of me. And he starts gradually working this rope scrape. And I'm up in a stand, and it just took him too long. I couldn't see my sight pins on my bow by the time he passed, so obviously didn't shoot. So I was pretty bummed that night. Well, where he came out and hit the first scrape on that scrape line, I had the perfect wind to hunt on that tree line the following night. And let's just say I screwed up. I'm not ashamed to admit it, but I'm still getting back into the routine and habit of hunting with a compound after using a crossbow for a few years. And he didn't come from my right to left. He came straight at me. And when he went down through a little swell, I should have stood up when he couldn't see me. And I stayed sitting down, and he didn't come to my left. He came to my right, locked up, was underneath of me, and just flat out couldn't shoot over my right shoulder. If I would have been standing up, he would be dead. But by the time I could get moved around to where I could get my bow up and over on my right side, he was literally walking straight away from me. Not spooked, not anything, just walking right out of my life again. So I was pretty devastated this week because it was complete 100% operator error.
Well, you're doing something right because you're getting him in range, so and you're not spooking him, so your odds are still pretty good if
I've done
unless
my
he
job.
shifts.
Yeah, I've done my job with the habitat and the farm. Now I will say this will not happen to me again, because that stand will either be moved slightly or there will be some type of obstacle to keep him off my right side next year. I can promise you that there'll either be a short section of fence, a down tree, something is going to change where he's going to be on my left side. And it might just be as simple as stand placement and angle. But it's constantly learning. I'm not hiding anything. I don't want to be anybody in this industry and don't care to be. I think I can just relate with a lot of hunters that put so much time and effort into chasing these critters that you got to learn too. And I still do not have it all figured out, but it's pretty demoralizing when you have him at 16 yards broadside over your right knee and have no way of pulling back on him. So I will not do that again.
Well, we all make mistakes. We're all still learning, and the fact that you've got a plan to change things so that it doesn't happen again. It's when you keep making the same mistake year after year after year that you never improve as a bow hunter. I try to minimize my mistakes, learn from past mistakes, and learn from past successes as well, and that's how we get better.
Yeah, my problem, my biggest, so what's the big deal? I didn't bump him. He walked straight away from me. Didn't know I was there. I got out. Um, the weird thing though is I've hunted, I believe, 7 or 8 sits. I'd have to go back and look at my notes. And every single hunt I could have killed a buck over 5 years old. And my worry is how long am I going to keep 3, 5.5 or older bucks on this small of a property? Something's got to give there. And my biggest fear is I had my chance. Am I going to get another? Not because I haven't done the work on the habitat. It's just, is he going to shift and get out of there? And I'll be honest with you, I thought long and hard about this. It's like if he ends up leaving and one of those other 2 5-year-olds are there, I'm still not going to shoot him. This is the only deer that I'm going to take opening day, and he's the only deer I'm going to take the last day of the season. So the reality this week set in that hopefully I get another shot. I got a northeast wind tonight and tomorrow night, so I can't hunt. I got to go to New York this week and won't be back. Probably hunting Illinois the following next weekend. My chances of probably shooting this deer are getting smaller and smaller, and that's okay. I'm not going to compromise what I'm doing here either.
Well, you've got a goal and you're sticking to it, and that's what we always preach. If you want to become a better whitetail hunter and you want to kill bigger bucks, you got to stick to your goals instead of compromising your goals. And that some years that's going to mean eating a tag, and if it happens, it happens. But you know what? The odds are that buck's going to survive. He's already mature. He's already, what is he, 5.5?
Yeah,
So,
I know for a fact he's 5.5. So we have quite a bit of history. So the likelihood he gets to 6.5, I don't know. We're a rifle state, so anything could happen. But yeah, it is what it is. At this point, if he was a booner, it would be tearing me up a whole lot more. But he's a good one, mid 150 class buck, and great buck for Kentucky, mature. That he's the one I want to shoot. So
yeah.
I will be taking other people on my farm hunting this year, and if the other 2 bucks show up, I hope that somebody kills them, and it's the buck of their dreams. So, but just not what I have my standards set to. So, pretty disappointing from my part because it was my fault. For all of those people who think that Don and I put ourselves on a pedestal and talk down to people, I'm being very brutally honest with you people. I'm living the same thing you guys do. So operator error in my case this week. But at least no one personally attacked or went after me like they did you. So I guess in some cases I'm in better shape.
Well, I had a pretty rough week, and people that are on social media got to see a little bit of that. But I had 4 different negative incidents this week involving other deer hunters. And in every case, it was a deer hunter that I don't know, I've never met. But it seems like if people think that it's tough to kill a deer on a mature deer, either on public or private, If you don't own the ground, try doing it in my shoes, because I'm telling you, every place that I go hunting, I draw attention. And I'm not saying that bragging or boastful in any way whatsoever, but I'm telling you, people do not like me in their hunting area. They just got this idea that if I show up, I'm going to kill the biggest deer there, and they make accusations to get me kicked off of properties. I had a false accusation made against me to law enforcement this week. I spent some time with a conservation officer clearing the air on a situation, and for the record, I called him and met with him. I told him, I want to look you in the eye. I'm going to tell you exactly what's going down here. And I'm not going to get into detail about all four situations. All four situations were completely different, totally different people, not connected in any way, but it was just one thing after another. And the one day my phone just exploded. It's like all these people are sending me links to this certain podcast and saying, man, this guy is just bashing you right and left on this podcast. You need to check it out. And I think it was the day I was planting trees at home. And when I go on my property this time of the year to do a project, I'm wanting to get it done. I'm not going to sit out there and talk on my phone. So I had my phone in my pocket, and it was just buzzing, buzzing, buzzing. And I finally got done and got back to the house, and I looked at it, and all these people were sending me links to this podcast, and this guy was raking me over the coals. A guy I've never met in my life, guy I've never had exchanged a single word with. No idea why he has such a personal vendetta against me, but anyway, that was one incident. But I want to share a story with the listeners, because it all came kind of full circle later in the week. I got a call from a good friend of mine, Steve Blackmeyer, and if Steve Blackmeyer's name sounds familiar to any of the listeners, he is featured in my book, Real World Whitetail Icons. Steve wrote 2 or 3 chapters in that book, and to describe Steve, I'm telling you, I know we're all sinners. We all got our faults. But if I ever met a perfect man in my life, it's Steve Blackmeyer. The man has not a bad word to say about anything, about any situation. He's the most courteous, well-mannered, respectful man to every single person he comes in contact with. You don't doubt at any point that the guy's a Christian, and yet he's not beating you over the head with scripture. He just lives it. And he calls me because he's seen that I was taking some heat on social media, and he called to encourage me. And he shared some things that have happened in his life in recent years. I hadn't talked to Steve in probably 2 years, maybe a little bit longer. But so he kind of reminds me of Job in the Bible. You know how Job was really tested. The devil tested Job, and Steve has undergone the same thing. And he shared with me that he comes from a small town of about 6,000 people, Robinson, Illinois. And Steve had a dream of building a church that would hold 1,000 people. And he went to the church board, his church, and he shared that dream, and he wanted to make it a reality. So they did. They built a church that held 1,000 people, and in a town of 6,000 people, on more than one occasion, they've had over 1,000 people in their church for a service. But he told me, he said, the price I paid was pretty steep, because the devil came after me hard when I did that. And it started, Steve had a logging business, and had a young man that was working for him. Steve was kind of mentoring this young man, taking him under his wing, and this young man was actually killed on the job. A tree fell on him and killed him. That tree fell on this young man and killed him the week he was going to get married. On that Saturday, this young man was getting married, and he was killed. And I mean, just devastated Steve. After that happened, the business fell apart because the other help, their wives got scared and made them quit their job and do something else. And then a short time later, Steve's wife had early onset Alzheimer's. She was in her 50s and she passed away. And then not long after that, his daughter passed away. She was, I'm just going to guess, she was around 40 years old. She had a son that was a senior in high school at the time. And Steve told me, he said the devil was coming after me hard, but when I lost my daughter, that was just about the breaking point. And he also he got involved in a business deal, putting in underground cable. Had 5 crews going around putting in underground cable, and just lost his shirt on that whole deal. The company he got involved with just kind of milked him dry. He had to sell his hunting land, everything he owned, just financially ruined him. Here's a man that lost, and he's got a son. A son has been in a wheelchair his entire life, and the son has some serious health issues right now. And so here's a man who lost his wife, he lost his daughter, his son is in a wheelchair with very serious health issues. A young man that he was mentoring was killed on the job working for Steve because this man had a dream of building a church that held 1,000 people. And after talking to Steve, I mean, I'm thinking about my own situation with the personal attacks that I take on social media, and from people that just don't understand my true story. They think that I was born rich and I've got all kinds of hundreds of acres of ground to hunt, and that things just come easy for me, as well as other assumptions people have made that just simply are not accurate. But after talking to Steve, it all brought it back into perspective that I'm extremely blessed. And, I kind of, well, you and I, had some correspondence after the incident on the podcast where the guy was bashing me. And it really gave me a chance to reflect on what kind of message I want to be sending to people, and how we've already made a decision that we're going to use this podcast to represent the hunting community, not the hunting industry. We're going to be brutally honest. We're going to tell it like it is. And I'm telling you, Friday was the eve of our opening day. Opening day was Saturday, and Friday, I've never, in all my life, I've never had a opening day eve where I felt so down as I did this year. I mean, I was in the dumps. I had a negative attitude. I'd just been through 4 different incidents this week with deer hunters that I don't even know, coming at me in various ways. But after talking to Steve, I realized how blessed I am. And, you kind of kept the wheels on the bus too, Terry, because in past years, I would have probably flown off the handle. And you've done a really good job on more than one occasion, keeping me focused on the big picture. And, what really bothers me the most is I've never tried to make myself out as better than anyone. I don't look down on anyone whatsoever. And people want to paint me as some arrogant jerk that's born with a silver spoon and has all these advantages is the only reason that I'm killing big deer. And when I talked to Steve, it just brought it all in perspective. That ain't really a big deal at all. I need to keep my eye on the bigger picture, focused on the prize. And I really appreciate your friendship, Terry, because you helped keep the wheels on the bus this week more than you know.
Well, our circle is very small when people really know it. And the people that we have in our life, I think, God put the right people in our lives for multiple reasons at the right time. And I have no doubt that attacks and stuff like this are going to continue to happen when we're trying to glorify God and do good with other people and be blessings to other people. We're going to try to even we probably haven't even seen the worst of it yet. What people don't understand, 2 things. Number one, I guess it's more than 2 things. The amount of support after you made the statement, kind of strategized a little bit together on what to say in that, and the amount of overall support that we have far, far outweighs any criticism or anything we get. So that support means more than what anybody just liking a post or the positive words back. And we appreciate what everybody says. Don't worry about it. But people don't understand that what we're trying to do with this platform to help people, it's we both have to have other revenue streams. This is not how we're paying the mortgage payment, if you will. But what we sacrifice in doing this, just like you said, if you weren't public figure, no one would even know you were where you were at, made the accusations that you had to deal with the game warding and all this other stuff. It handcuffs us so much about what we're really doing in the woods, because we don't have the big ranches that have 3,000 acres where we can basically just hide on our own property. We're just like everybody else, going out mostly hunting permission properties. And because we're on here, then we're well known. We have to kind of be strategic in what we say so we don't give too much away. But then we see our truck driving down the road, then it's really hard. People don't understand that. And I appreciate when somebody says to you, you shouldn't worry about what people say. You guys aren't the ones putting your life out in the public view, trying to do it for the greater good, and then get attacked. And I hear what you're saying. It's just, I'm telling you, it's harder than what people say it is when they say don't worry about it. It's hard. You've put yourself in a very vulnerable position with really good intentions, and it really hurts when you get attacked.
Well, the worst part for me is that people spread false information about it. It's not even true. So someone makes up their mind about me. They come up with their opinion of me based on information that's not even true. And you're right, we shouldn't worry about it, but I'm telling you, it's when you're being judged by something that's not even true, it's hard not to get fired up.
Well, we're not going to take a lot of time on the podcast, and I know there'll be even people comment down below on this that we don't worry about it. Quit taking up time. Let's talk deer hunting. We got Jay Gingrich's segment on deck, and we do, but we feel that we owe an explanation to people about why things are done the way they are. And the reason we made the statement on Don's social media is we got, between Don and I, got over 1,000 messages. I counted it up. I had over 700 on my social media alone. Over 700. And it wasn't even about me. It's just people are sending it to me because they don't want to bother you and saying, well, what? So it was just getting overwhelming. We wanted to take a quick break, pray about it, think about it, try to do the right thing. And obviously, based on the feedback that we got, I think everybody appreciated that. Now, saying that, we are going to be committed again to serving the hunting community and not the hunting industry. So we also ask for your respect when we make a decision that if these other platforms out there continue to try to just create drama amongst the hunting community for the sake of clickbait, we're also going to separate ourselves away from that. That's not who we're going to be. So, Don and I have been on a lot of different podcasts trying to help the community, and sharing I can't even say how many podcasts you've been on besides this one, doing free interviews for people and then promoting their brand. I think the lesson for us to learn now is we're going to be really careful, because if someone's not trying to do good for the community and trying to add division for the sake of creating drama, which this is all that was, we're going to separate ourselves away from it. We hold ourselves to a higher standard than that. It was a little bit humbling for us being on this side of it, that we need to learn from it, because we're not saying we're perfect. We've thrown little digs into on things on this podcast to get under people's skin, but never personally attacked anybody. So it is what it is. We just, I guess the takeaway from it is we're still learning. We're trying to stay humble. We're trying to be real. I just admitted I screwed up on a buck. Don, we're being overly transparent, and we can't do this without you guys. We really appreciate the support. So let's take a quick break from Osseo, and we'll come back with a great segment learning about trees and that delicate balance of hunting season starting and the best time to plant fruit trees and habitat trees for your property. So stay tuned.
Osseo Gear introduces a premium line of bow hunting gear that is unmatched, pairing nature's finest camouflage with the best technological innovations. Osseo Gear brings whitetail bow hunters the gear they need to be the best at their craft. The unique camouflage mimics the intricate feather pattern of North America's greatest predatory creatures. Designed for invisibility, built for comfort, and engineered for function. Visit OsseoGear.com. That's ASIO Gear.com to start shopping. Osseo Gear. Prepare to be invisible.
All right, well, welcome back, Don. We're going to switch. Unfortunately, we didn't have a way to get Jay on camera tonight, so for the people listening on MTech and the call-in services, you're not going to notice any different when we patch Jay Gingrich in, but for the folks that are watching on YouTube, we're going to splice in a couple pictures. Don, you were just at his place because you went and picked up trees for your property. We're going to put his contact information and some still photography up as we play this segment with Jay Gingrich about planting trees in the fall. I think you're going to like it and find it extremely informative.
Well, welcome everyone to the segment of the Chasing Giants podcast with Jay Gingrich from Gingrich Tree Farms. I have him and Don on the line. Jay, welcome to the podcast. This is your first appearance on this.
It is, Terry. Hey, thanks to you and Don for having me on.
For those of you who have been to some master classes, Jay has come over. He lives close to Don, goes to church with Don, so he's no stranger to the master class when we do podcasts over there. So some of you who have been there have met him, but as far as being on the live episode, we're happy to have you. And most people are going to think October 2nd, we're going to be talking about deer hunting, but this is something I've really struggled with personally with my habitat development, and I'm excited about this dialogue tonight because really when we boil it down, Don, I want you to say a few words on the best time to plant trees is really in the fall, and how does that relate to we're getting ready to hunt?
Well, without a doubt, fall is the best time to plant trees, and the reason for it is that tree is going dormant when you plant it for the winter, but a tree's roots can still grow even when that tree is dormant. So you get that tree planted, and those roots will grow until the ground temperature gets below about 35 degrees. It just gives that tree a big jump start over a spring planting. As far as tying it into hunting season, I actually went to Gingrich Tree Farm this week and picked up a load of trees that I planted on my farm. And the reason that I was willing to do that, first of all, is I don't have a shooter buck here this year. So I'm not a bit worried about spooking the deer or anything like that. But with that said, I was prepared, and I went in and got about, I think I planted about 80 trees on this place, and I did it in half a day. So I didn't drag it on for 2 days or 3 days. I got in, got the work done, and got out, and now I'm out for the rest of the season. But it just depends on your individual situation, and if it fits, if maybe you just bought a new property and the habitat's not up to par, and it's more important to get that habitat work done and get the farm, up to snuff, then you might consider doing a fall tree planting because it's absolutely the best time to plant trees.
So, we look at anything we do, Jay, as an investment, and we need a return on that investment. From your experience, you plant trees, throughout the year and along with other services that we'll talk about later. But do you truly see a better survival rate when you're planting that tree before the dormant season versus as it's coming out, trying to bloom, and then you're putting the stress of that root ball down into the ground, moving it around?
Well, as Don stated, fall, that's definitely the best time. I mean, springtime, you put it in the ground, and if you don't get any rainfall, it's a struggle, like here in central Illinois this year. We had a 6-week stretch where we didn't get any rain. We lost a lot of trees. So fall is definitely the best time to plant.
Yeah. So, we talk about intrusion, and I think Don hit the nail on the head. Don, you said your home farm this year, it just aligned right. I don't think you would have been doing a big tree planting the year you had Mel running around, right? I mean, you have
absolutely not.
You have to make decisions based on what's going on. But for the most part too, we're not planting trees in the middle of the sanctuary either. So, it's like other work. And I like the phrase that you just said, is that you go in and get it done. It's not a 3-4 week project. Jay, when you got a pretty big team of people. So I know you're going to be traveling very close to my house, if you haven't already, this fall for one of the listener on the podcast farm, I believe, to plant some trees. How does your team attack that, trying to be sensitive of the hunter that's still trying to, be able to hunt that property in the fall and not cause too much damage? Do you fly in and get it done? What techniques do you use? What equipment is vital?
We do. We try not to spend a lot of extra time there. We have a skid loader, side by side, things like that to haul the trees in. When you're on equipment, you're obviously not going to cause a whole lot of disturbance, but obviously planting trees, we'll be off and doing things, but, on, let's say, 100 apple tree job, we might be there a day and a half at the most. Right. Usually we try to get in and out in the day's time.
Yeah. And like anything else, I mean, the alfalfa was cut on my property yesterday. So, that's obviously intrusion. That's, pressure that you're giving the property. But, Don, I think there's a difference in going in with a piece of equipment and, running trees out, drilling them, drilling a hole, putting them in, backfilling it, than somebody stomping around, walking through the sanctuary looking for dead deer along a creek bank or around a pond, right?
Yeah, I mean, this time of the year, the farmers are in the field. Those deer hear equipment and see equipment every day. So, a guy on a skid loader digging holes to plant trees is not that big a deal, and especially if it's a one-day deal and he's gone. So, in fact, the deer are kind of curious. I know this week when I planted trees on my farm, I had a trail camera probably about no more than 100 yards, probably between 50 and 100 yards from where I was planting these trees. And within 2 hours of me being done, it was a cell camera. Within 2 hours of me being done, I was getting pictures right there at that camera, right where I was at. It was almost like the deer were curious and they came over to see what I was doing.
Well, it's important for us to go into that dialogue, because people that listen to this podcast take us so literally that, you can't step foot on your property. There is things that we have to do on our property, whether it's mowing or maintenance, or in this case, it's the constant pressure. It's surprising deer, walking up on them while they're bedding, going through your habitat. Planting trees is a much different activity than going in and doing TSI through the middle of your sanctuary, which you won't do unless it's February, right?
That's correct. Yeah, something else I'll throw out there, Terry, is that when I had a tree business, several years ago, I probably planted more trees in the month of December than any other month. And so, guys can wait till the rut's over, and if the ground's not froze, you can still get in there and get some work done before winter sets in. And the thing you need to do, though, is you need to secure those trees ahead of time, because a lot of nurseries will they'll prepare for the winter. They'll lay those potted trees over and cover them with plastic for the winter. So, you can get your trees now and have a place to store them. And then as soon as the rut's over, Thanksgiving or whatever, get in there and get them planted later in the fall.
Well, I think that's a great segue into the next topic. I wanted to bounce ideas off of both of you. And we have to be careful, because this podcast has listeners all over the country. So we want to make sure we throw caveats out there for the people listening in South Georgia and the people listening in northern Minnesota. But Don, you talked and did a really good video on your top trees and the worst trees that get kind of overhyped. Jay, I'll ask you to talk about it from someone that's wanting to manage for wildlife. What is kind of the go-to or most popular type of tree that people are trying to put out there?
Well, from my perspective, cedar trees and oak trees, for bedding cover, thermal cover. And then you move into, chestnuts, persimmons, trees like that people really like. Apple trees, we've been putting in a lot of apple and pear trees. Just adds another whole element to their food source for the deer.
Don, as far as we talk about food plot diversity, how important is diversity? If I want to say I have a spot that's either a strip that I want to put trees in, or say I have a spot that's I want to make a tree stand a better location, is diversity better to where I have different types of trees in that little mini orchard, or should I just go with all the same kind? What's some tips there as far as choosing the species of trees?
Well, what I like to do if I'm trying to enhance the stand side is I'm not planting a giant orchard a lot of times. I just plant 3 or 4. And when I'm doing that, I want to stick with the same species, but different varieties of the species. So if you're planting apple trees, plant 3 or 4 different apple trees. It'll help with pollination as those different varieties cross-pollinate each other. But then, I may move across the farm, and the next spot I'm planting chestnuts. There's not any diversity there, but as well as persimmons. But you can plant pears, have different varieties of pears. But another thing I really like to do is on my food plots, I like to, along the edge of the food plot, plant a row of mass-bearing trees. It just adds drawing power to that plot, because besides whatever you're growing in that plot, you've got those fruit trees around the edge to just add to the pulling power.
Now, Jay, I'm not a tree expert by any means. I still have a lot to learn when it comes to this, but if you Don mentioned different varieties of like an apple trees or pear trees or something like that. Does putting diversity also give you more chances to combat with, say, you get a disease on a tree? Is different varieties there? If something were to move in, you had all the same varieties, you could lose everything if something happened. With a variety, it looks like that you could have a better chance if something happened to minimize the damage.
That's absolutely correct. Let's say you have a bad scab year. I know in Ohio this year they did, and a lot of that, has to do with the wet weather. So if you have a couple varieties that are not very disease resistant as far as scab goes, that will, lessen your production. So we always go in and try to, put a mixture in. I was checking my website or my list earlier. We've got about 8 different varieties that we have to offer. So it is definitely the best to put some different ones in.
So if one variety happens to be struggling that year, the other ones still kind of produce. It's very similar, Don, to what we say about soybeans.
Yeah, and the other thing is different varieties have different ripening dates. So if you just stuck with one variety, all those apples would become ripe at once and drop at once, and it'd be over. But you can really extend that window when that crop is available by diversifying the varieties that you add to your planting.
All right. Well, I don't want to take a lot of time getting into, the best variety versus the worst variety and stuff. I think it's probably better suited for our listeners to go to the Chasing Giants YouTube channel and search for Don's 2 different tree videos. That goes into a lot of detail about specifics, but let's shift gears a little bit. We have a lot of kind of DIY guys that, try to do everything there. And inside of a DIY situation, you have a big variety of equipment that's available. Some guys have skid loaders. Some guys have a pickaxe and a shovel. Jay, obviously, what if somebody could hire you to come in and do a big planting like this, but are trees as sensitive to specific equipment, or if you got the sweat and the energy, can you do just as good with a shovel?
I absolutely can. We specialize, at least in the fall, in potted trees. So potted trees a little more forgiving. Like we talked earlier about fall planting is best. You get that potted tree in the ground, that root system goes to work all winter long, or at least when the temps aren't below freezing. So, in springtime, we offer bare root. So those are going to be maybe a little easier to plant in the spring, soil soft and all that. But a shovel works great. I mean,
Okay.
just dig a hole and put them in there, and you'll be fine.
So a potted tree. Help me understand this, Jay. So a potted tree in the fall, it's going to be like a pot that you would buy garden plants in or whatever, just a little bit bigger in size that has the root ball already in potting soil. What do you need to do to prepare that site? Do you need to spray it with herbicide first? Do you just dig it up and then put good dirt back in? What's some techniques about planting a tree? And then also, I'll let you just keep rolling with it. What is the deal with tubes? How do I stake it? How do I protect it? Kind of walk us through I have a spot that I want a tree, all the way through how do I protect the tree through after I plant it.
Yeah, we offer all different sizes from 1 gallon to like 15-gallon pots. So, the size of your hole obviously determined by that. It's not difficult by any means. Put that in there, protect it. The herbicide, if you have some places you want to plant trees that fall, maybe in the summertime, you come in there and spray with Roundup, kill those spots. So, as Don alluded to earlier, he had one day he went in there, planted his trees. So that's one thing you can do to prepare. So you do that, you come in, plant your tree, put your tube stake on it or a wire cage for your fruit trees. So it's pretty simple. If you have a half a dozen trees, you can be in and out in an hour's time.
Right. Don, what do you got to protect for? Obviously, this tree has just been transplanted. We know how deer browse, especially fresh growth tips of anything that's around. I'm assuming young trees get nipped off a lot. I know in several cases I've seen on your farm where you'll put a wire fence, probably a 5-foot diameter around it, 4-foot diameter, until that tree is big enough to be sustainable on itself. Is that because of deer browse?
Yeah, that's exactly what that's for. The other thing you want to do is put some kind of wrap around the trunk to keep the rabbits from girdling those fruit trees. They'll gnaw on that bark, especially in the wintertime, really bad. But, you can just use old field fence. If a lot of farms have old fence that's been rolled up, and, I'll make a 5-foot or 6-foot diameter ring with that field fence, set a couple of steel fence posts next to that tree. And then when I put that fence around it, I raise that fence up about 18 inches off the ground to give it more height to keep the deer from just reaching over the top and eating that tree. That also makes it easier to mow around when that fence is up. You can get your mower underneath that fence. It's 18 inches off the ground. So I tell, when I was in the business, a tree business, I told people only buy as many trees as you plan on protecting. If you plant 10 trees and you put cages around and protect them, or you plant 100 trees with no protection at all, the guy that plants the 10 trees is going to have more trees in the end because the deer are just going to destroy the ones that aren't protected.
So help me understand these tubes. And again, I'm asking questions to not only tee up dialogue, but also learn myself. Tubes are probably used more for the smaller seedlings than they are for potted trees, because potted trees will be branched out more. Is that a correct statement, Jay?
Yes, that's correct.
So what is the purpose of the tube? What is it? Does it stimulate growth, or is it just protect, or both?
Yes, the idea is to give it a little bit of a greenhouse effect, protect it. And we usually use a 60-inch tall tube. The deer won't be able to browse the top of that. If you use a 4-foot tube, you will lose the top of that tree and it'll forever struggle. So we usually put a tube on and a nice wooden oak stake, and it'll last the length of time it needs, so the tree can support itself. And the tubes, they have a little perforated slot down through them, so they will just burst off themselves. They won't restrict the growth as the tree grows.
Okay, so as that tree is basically fighting to grow to, I guess, kind of get above that, it's stimulating that vertical growth that we want. We see a lot of dialogue and a lot of people talking about what happens above ground. What do we need to happen below ground? When we're talking to food plotters who want to plant clover or a throw and grow in the woods, open sections of woods, we have to remind food plotters that basically the size of that tree, the diameter of the tree above ground, is about the size of the diameter below ground. and that's a huge competition you have for any product growing up underneath. As I'm transplanting a tree, say with a pod or a seedling, what is kind of can a tree grow too much out the top without developing the foundation? It's very important for switchgrass and miscanthus. So you want it to work underground as much as you do above to get that foundation.
I suppose it can, but we typically plant potted trees. So in that scenario, I don't know that it really does. Don, he's been around trees a lot longer than I have, so he may want to add something there.
Well, the one thing about the tubes is they're made for a hardwood tree. An oak, for example, they're not made for evergreens. You're going to have to protect those with a wire cage. And they're also really not made for a fruit tree that has a shorter trunk. So, think of those tubes for your oaks only. And, once they grow out the top, then they really branch out. And that tube is there to protect that trunk from bucks rubbing on them.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's just, my neighbor and I planted 2 small fruit trees back many, many years ago, and the things have just been a disaster. I guess one of the other fears that I have with my lack of knowledge of fruit trees is, do we prune them? Do we cut them back? I grew up, all of my family is from Northern Virginia, which is really famous apple area with the White House Company. People remember White House apple juice and applesauce. That's where all that is in the Shenandoah Valley. And I remember going in and seeing them cut back these fruit trees every year. When we're doing, obviously that's for apple production for commercial side, but for food plot trees, what does a landowner need to know going into it as far as choosing fruit trees? How much maintenance? Do we spray? Do we prune? What all has to be done with that?
You shouldn't have to go in and do anything for a while. But after a few years, you'll see a lot of smaller branches. The tree will just, be real heavy, a lot of small branches, and it'll produce a lot of apples, but they'll be real tiny. So if you prune that tree back occasionally, every couple of years, dial it back a little bit, to one of the larger branches, take all the small growth out of it, you'll get better production. As far as insecticides on a tree, yes, you can. Certain years it'll help a lot, but the varieties we try to plant are a lot more disease resistant than your typical backyard orchard. So they are, bred to be left alone in the woods, and they'll do fine.
Yeah, it's almost like a variety that might not be the right fit for a big commercial apple orchard to make cider or apple juice, but more along the lines of what we're trying to do, where you plant it, leave it alone, and develop and feed the wildlife.
Correct.
All right. Well, I know you can go in. You offer a lot of services with Gingrich Tree Farms, but you also just sell trees to people who want them. What you said now I believe you have some inventory right now, but now's a very popular time. Don just mentioned we need to get with your grower. The problem is a lot of people search online. We try to educate people on seed tags a lot with Real World. What do we need to watch for if we're online looking to buy trees? And we'll focus on your specific varieties in a little bit, but just as a general rule of thumb, what are the things, if I live in Wisconsin or I live in Ohio, what do I need to watch for if I'm out shopping for trees about where that thing was originally from, what varieties, so that I know I'm picking the right product for my area?
Well, what you find at a lot of home centers is trees that are coming out of the deep south. For example, they're going to get a lot more growth. So that's a popular place to grow trees, which makes total sense. But if you are in northern Illinois, central Illinois, that's not always a great thing. The other thing is a potted tree. We try to grow them in a root pruning, what they call an air pruning pot. Not to get into the weeds there, but it allows the roots to develop a lot better and not circle. For hardwoods, that's a pretty big deal. Conifers, not so much, but especially hardwoods.
Okay. Don, you've talked about it before. Growing trees in the South, you basically get 2 growing seasons out of 1 year. And that's why we're growing in the South. And just because it's grown in the South doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but the variety needs to be a northern variety, right?
Yeah, it really depends on where the seed source come from that the tree was grown from. Back when I had the tree business, I would gather seed here in central Illinois and ship it to Mississippi and have a contract grown for me in Mississippi, because they could get in one growing season what would take me 2 years here. But another thing that people really need to look for is in these potted trees is a lot of times the tree has been in that pot too long, and if you would pull that tree out of the pot, you're just going to see a root bound mess. So those trees, the roots have grown out to the edge of the pot, and then they start growing around the pot in a circular fashion. And I planted trees like this. Most of what I'm sharing, I learned the hard way. So I'm trying to save people from making the same mistakes. But, I planted potted trees that were root bound before, and they did pretty well for a while. But then once that tree got some size on it, that root system was not branched outward to really anchor that tree to the ground. And I lost all kinds of really nice apple trees when a good windstorm come along. And the ground was soft from a lot of rain, and it just blew them trees right over because that root system just grew in a circular fashion instead of branching outward. So if you're going to buy potted trees, pull that tree out of the pot, and if it is root bound, just take a utility knife and slice that whole root bound mess up and down to cut those roots. And where it's cut, it'll start growing a new root outward.
So basically,
that's really important to look
basically what happened is the correct me if I'm wrong, the roots growing out, it hits the wall of the pot, basically J-hooks and goes back into the inside. So when you plant it, those roots just continue to get intertwined with each other instead of branching out, making a good foundation where it can absorb more nutrients from a larger diameter soil. Is that what's going on?
That's pretty much it. And not only the absorption of nutrients, but it just doesn't anchor that tree. And Jay, the ultimate pot, and Jay mentioned it just a minute ago, is the root pruning pot, where the pot is not solid plastic, but it's got holes in it or slots in it. So that root grows out and it tries to grow through that hole, and it stops growing because the root won't grow in the air, and it kind of root prunes it. And so when it hits that hole and stops growing, the root will put on more branches or more root further back, and they will try to branch outward. Well, you pull that tree out of that pot, and you just got many, many times more roots growing at an outward angle, and you stick those trees in the ground, and they will just far outdo a tree that's grown in a smooth-sided pot.
Wow, that's a great tip. I guess anybody who's going to like a Home Depot or a big box store or a local nursery, a good tip there for people to look at when they see a tree that they might be interested that's in a pot then.
Right.
Okay.
And Jay, I was just at Jay's this week, as I mentioned, picking up a load of trees. They've got a lot of trees growing in those root maker pots. So you guys are wanting some trees for your projects to plant later this winter, even if you're going to do it after the rut in December, I'd get with Jay and check out his inventory.
Yeah, Jay, what let's go ahead and talk about your inventory right now, and how do people get them? What can you ship? What do people have to pick up? Because I know you got trees going all over the place because you've donated tree packages for both years we've done a Lester's Feet raffle. So you've supported the foundation that way, but I've seen where you've been able to ship some of these trees. So how does all that work?
Yeah, most of the trees we have it's a little unhandy. They're a little too big to ship reasonably priced. So, but we do travel quite a bit. So I always work with the customer, try to get it to them. If I can do it, or maybe we'll even be able to, arrange freight for them, or if they want to come by and pick them up themselves. That's the best way to do it, for sure.
With the crews that you have going all around doing different projects, I mean, I just mentioned you're going to be here in northern Kentucky, I think, very soon.
December, we're doing that job, actually.
Yep. So, as much as you all are traveling around, there's possibility of you being able to deliver them, too, if you're in someone's local area. They just have to give you a call.
That's right.
Well, even though this episode's talking about fall planting of trees, talk a little bit about the other services that you offer with your business. I know you have grown this thing to be. You've built a beautiful new building, really expanded the business. Talk a little bit about what other services that you guys have to offer throughout the year as it relates to habitat.
Yeah, obviously the trees. We offer different varieties of apple trees, oaks, and all that stuff. But related to habitat, springtime is extremely busy for us. So we do a lot of miscanthus planting, put a lot of switchgrass in with no-till drill, CRP projects if you're in the Midwest. We do a lot of that, whether it's trees or pollinator programs. In the wintertime, we do TSI work if someone needs it done. That's more they can handle. Why we do offer some of that.
I know you've done big projects on both, I believe, Chris Yates and Brian Crafts, who donated the truck last year with Victory Chevrolet and Midwest Land Group. I believe you've done big projects for either one or both of them also, right?
We have, yeah. I was hoping to win that truck, but I just buy mine.
You're one of the guys that's on the same diesel package as Don and I are, but you're one of the ones that makes Chris cringe a little bit with how many miles you put on your truck.
Well, yeah, I've been trying to get another one out of him. He told me about 2 days ago. He said he doesn't have it yet, so I'm like, okay, I'm waiting.
I think he's been doing the inventory of all of us because he called both Don and I this week asking how many miles are on the truck. So, but yeah, I mean, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you? I know your company is growing at a rapid pace, and you have a lot of people that's good people that's on your team to help you. But how do they get in touch with you? How do they follow you? How do you get those ideas sparking? Because at the end of the day, most of the listeners to this podcast are going to be sitting in a tree stand watching deer walk across the field, trying to think of ways that can make the property they're setting in better. And you have a lot of experience that can help people with that. So when they're sitting there and they have an idea and they want to run it by you or talk about a product that's available, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can call the office, 217-717-2534. That's probably the best way. We're always out in the field working, but we do answer the phone. GingrichTreeFarm.com. That'll get you some information. So you can do a contact form on there if you can't reach us any other way. But we'll call you back if you leave us a message, or we'll talk to you when you call.
So if you're interested in trees this fall, or if you're interested in miscanthus being planted for you, switchgrass, TSI work, any of those services, make sure you get in touch with Jay's team to get it on the radar, because it's like anything else. The earlier you know of projects, the better you can plan and make a good game plan to do the best job at the best opportune time for each individual customer.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, number one, I appreciate the friendship. I appreciate the support of the podcast, but on a little bit simpler note, you have been one of the biggest supporters of the Lester's Feet Foundation, not only being a donor from the tree business, but also on the leadership committee at Solid Rock Chapel, who partnered with us to do last year's raffle. A big supporter of ours, and I can't thank you enough, both as a friend and a partner. We can't say enough about how proud we are to be associated with you.
Well, I appreciate that, and I feel the same way about you guys, and I'll do my best to support what you guys are doing. I like it.
Don, I want you to end this segment by talking about something that's probably the most important thing when we decide that we do business with someone or we promote someone, and that's the quality of people that are behind the organizations that we work with. And we've talked about Matthews, we've talked about other companies like Osseo on this podcast, but they don't get much better than Jay.
No, I've known Jay for several years. Him and I have gone to the same church for, I don't know, around 15 years now. When I started, he was already going there. But, the Gingrich Tree Farm, he actually bought my tree business years ago. Him and his wife, Loretta, bought Higgins Tree Farm. I converted it to Gingrich Tree Farm, and he's done fantastic with it. It's probably at least tripled, maybe more than that since he's bought it. And, I just, he's the kind of people, or him and his wife are the kind of people that we want to deal with. And, besides the fact that they're top quality people, they're selling top notch nursery stock as well. Their trees are not the same stuff you're going to get down at the local hardware store or farm store or wherever. Much better quality. And you're supporting a small business, a local small business when you deal with Gingrich Tree Farm. You're having issues, you got a phone number to call and ask questions that you don't get at the farm store. So I just encourage everybody, if you're needing trees for your habitat work, give Jay and Loretta a call.
Well, Jay, you don't probably know this story, but you had a very, very close tie to my hunting season one year. Do you know that?
Oh, no, I do not.
The day that you and Don signed the paperwork to sell the tree business was the day that I shot the 10.5-year-old on Don's farm, because he had to get out of the blind to run down to sign the paperwork with you. And about 20 minutes after he got out of the stand, the deer walked out, so we didn't get it on video that day.
Oh, man.
That's right, isn't it, Don?
Yeah.
Isn't that right?
Yeah.
He hadn't even
did not know that.
He had not even left the house yet, and I said, I'm just going to sit here and wait and see if he walks out and where he goes to bed at, so we know where to hunt tonight. And it wasn't 20 minutes. He hadn't even left the house yet, and I'd shot him. So I remember that day very well.
Good deal. Well, hey, I appreciate the kind words and everything. You guys are awesome to work with.
All right. Thanks for your help. And please reach out to Gingrich Tree Farms. We'll post their information on the screen above. And for those listening, please reach out. Jay, give that number just one more time before we sign off.
217-717-2534.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jay.
Bye.
All right, Don. Well, Jay's about as good as it gets as far as a friend and fellow Christian man that he's put God first in a lot of things, and his business is completely blown up and growing. And we continue to wish him the best as he continues to expand his business.
Yeah, just a perfect example of the kind of people we want to be dealing with.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, we're going to, because of the length of that segment, we're going to drop to 3 listener submitted questions. So we'll do this first one, and then we're going to take a little bit of a break for a Lester's Feet segment before we go to the second question. So I'm going to share the first question, and I think you're trying to get me fired up right out of the gate with the first question that you picked for tonight. But I'm glad that I'm going to do the Lester's Feet segment, so I got to keep a level head here before I start talking about that.
Well, I'm not sure if this person is trying to poke the bear or if it's a serious question, but I picked it anyway because I want to answer it.
It'll be the same answer regardless. So what's it matter what his intention? I don't care what his intention is. It's the same answer.
Brian Woodward from Wheatfield, Indiana sends this question. It says, this question is for Don. You have stated on several occasions that a habitat analysis done off an aerial view is a waste of money. That is, you must have boots on the ground to appreciate the property and its potential. You also said that you will be evaluating each habitat project done by your dream team. You are doing this without ever stepping foot on the property. Explain why your review is any better than someone doing a plan based on an aerial view, and if it is because each team member will be relaying to you what they observed while on the property for a few hours. Why do you think that their description is any better than the person who owns the property and has spent years, if not decades, there? Well, Brian, I think first of all, you totally don't understand the process. These guys that are going out and putting boots on the ground on the property, they're not coming back and relaying the information to me, and then I'm taking their information and putting it on a plan. These guys are creating the plan. They are doing the plan. The only thing that I'm doing is I'm reviewing that plan before it gets sent to the client. And if I see something that jumps out at me, I'm going to challenge the consultant that visited that property and say, hey, why did you do this? Why didn't you put this food plot here instead of there? How is this client going to access stand number 3, or something like that? That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to challenge the consultants on the dream team with things that appear on that aerial. And you know what? I expect them to have a good answer every time. They're going to see things on their tour that I just cannot see on that aerial. And my challenge to them is basically to keep them on their toes, but also to ensure that the client gets the best plan that they can. If you think that you can get a great plan from somebody marking an aerial, well, go ahead and spend your money doing that. I'm just here to tell you that I would not waste my money doing such a thing.
If you just needed somebody to go tour the property and document it and send it to you for a plan, you could bring in anybody. And I'm on the list, and I probably shouldn't be, because I don't even know when to stand up when a freaking buck is walking across the field at me. I feel like an idiot. But but we wouldn't need Mark Luster and Bobby Worthington and Wes Delks, who have all been very experienced in their own ways and bring something different to the table. I think Brian's thinking that we just go out as like a site evaluator and then give it to you to put the plan together. And I think it's just a simple misunderstanding of, and maybe he's just teeing it up for us to explain it better. There is going to be some things like if I'm doing something that requires, say, a pollinator CRP program, that on my plan, I'll mark that area and say, we need bedding here. And I can document that and then get your advice for what species or tree. We just had the document, or the segment with Jay Gingrich. What trees do we recommend here? What varieties, based on that your experience would add input into that? And that's part of this total package of involving you versus me just handing you the plan after I leave. But yeah, I think it's just a miscommunication. I don't think he's necessarily being malicious or anything with his intent, but I think it's much the process works a lot different than what he's assuming with his question.
Right. And we appreciate your question, Brian. Hope you have a great hunting season.
Yep. So let's take a quick break. Matthews is obviously our partner on the archery side. Have you gotten your new bow yet, by the way?
I did get my new Matthews bow.
So Don's got a
Matthews bow.
He's not allowed to show. You're not allowed to show pictures of it. So you're on the small list of people that is testing and prototyping next year's Matthews bow. So you'll be releasing that information in probably November, I think, is when that comes out. So Don's on the short list. So if you see a picture of Don with in the woods with his bow, it's going to be blurred, so you can't see any of the design of the bow. And then I'm shooting the latest VX3. But Matthews gave up their segment of the podcast every week so that we could talk about Lester's feet. And I decided to do something a little bit different this week, Don. And I don't want to turn this into a church service, but like you said, we both had a really rough week. And I think about these families that are dealing with these, kids that are sick. And my mom had a pretty big scare this week too. As people know, where we've asked for prayers, mom ended up having a couple stents put in with some heart problems that she's been trying to deal with. And my family is out of town on fall break. So this morning I went up and sat with mom at church today while dad preached. So I don't get a chance to go to church with them very often. It's about almost an hour away. So I got up early this morning and went up and sat in church. And I sat there, and my dad was starting a new series of messages. My dad's a senior minister at the Glen Estee Church of Christ. And I went up and stole his sermon off the pulpit today because I thought it was so fitting, not only for the week that we've had, but also people ask a lot how they can help with Lester's feet. And I think this is just God working and using my dad's sermon on something that I needed to hear today.
And his series and the sermon was called "Can Historic Christianity Stand Up?" And today's segment was "To Our Doubt," meaning the doubt Christians have. We all go to believe in Christ, but there's still doubts that we have. And the passage, the story that he centered this around, was out of Mark 9. And for those who don't know that specific chapter very well, this is the dad who had a child that was demon possessed his whole life. And Jesus came to the area, and there's this big, scuffle and bunch of commotion. And Jesus asked, "What's going on?" And this dad, I can feel for this dad, because he's like so many of our Lester's Feet family. He's like, "My son's sick." He's like, we can't fix him. We've tried all these things. I've brought my son to you. And I'm not going to go into the whole manuscript of it, but basically he approached Jesus and he's just torn up, saying, "I brought my son to you," in verse 17. And Jesus looks at him and says, "Bring the boy to me." And when the demon, saw Jesus, he threw the boy into this fit of rage. And Jesus said, "How long has this child been this way?" And his dad said, "Since childhood." And the dad said something that was so pivotal in this whole story. His dad looked at Jesus and said, if you can do anything, question mark." He's looking at Christ and asking the question, "Can you do anything? What, you might not even be able." And Jesus turns around and is like, face palm to this guy. He's like, "If?" He's like, "What do you mean if?" It's like, "Are you really asking me this question? Don't you know who I am?" But Jesus said, "Everything is possible for him who believes." And what I thought about isn't necessarily this doubt that this dad had, that Jesus, that there was a fix with Christ in this situation, but it was the follow-up segment that the dad had that was just stuck out to me, as we're talking about the humility that we had to show this week instead of jumping back up this guy's throat, or other things that we've dealt with. The dad looks back and says, "I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief." How pivotal is that in our life? It's like, yes, I acknowledge, I believe, I get it, but I'm still struggling. Help me. And I just think that as we're navigating these struggles and these attacks, we're going to try to stay humble. If you're wanting to help Lester's Feet, this story in itself is such a huge encouragement for the people who are dealing with sick children to put themselves in this guy's, because they're doubting it. They're saying, is my kid sick because of something I did? Is it, in my life, is my kid being punished for something that I did? Share this story. If you really want to help find a way to minister, talk about Mark chapter 9, especially around verses 17, with a family that has a tragedy going on because they're feeling that doubt in their head about why they're doing it. And then come back to the whole point. It's all things are possible. So my dad closed the sermon today with this pivotal thing that I thought was so cool. You should never doubt that God can do anything. We just need to pray that he will. So it's natural for us as humans to have doubt. It's natural for us to have fears. It's natural for us to basically question. But the power of God, if we have a relationship with him, is something that we can lean on. And no matter what your struggle is, there should never be a single doubt. But the humility this dad said back to Jesus was, "I do believe, help me overcome my unbelief." And not many people would humble themselves like that and say, "Yeah, I'm struggling here." So Don and I, neither one are perfect. So I'm going to try actually to get the audio version of this and probably put on the Lester's Feet, because I truly believe that sermon is a really good witness for the people who are dealing with sick children. And after you were talking about your friend that called you and
all that stuff had happened in his life. I'm sure that through time he's shown doubt, as why is this stuff happening to us? So stay the course, keep priorities, and we're going to try to stay as humble as we can. But I just thought I would share that with everybody today.
Great message.
All right, so let's move on to question number 2.
The next question comes from Andrew Meyer from Lee's Summit, Missouri. He says, "Hey, Don, my name is Andrew Meyer, a 16-year-old from northern Missouri. I just wanted to ask you about how you go about exiting stands, especially those on food sources in the evenings. When you have lots of deer feeding in front of you, whether in a tower blind or tree stand, what techniques or tactics do you use to escape undetected? Also, I know you don't mind if you get pictures of bucks at night, but as far as hunting outside the rut, I don't want to be too intrusive with hunting the timber or mornings, but the 2 bigger bucks I am targeting have been inconsistent and nocturnal on the food sources. Where are you mainly setting up your stand locations for this time of year? And do you hunt different types of areas and habitat features during the rut, or are you just hunting your more top-notch high percentage stands in the same types of habitat features?" Well, Andrew, the reason I selected your question is because it's a question I get a lot.
But
And
this
I mean,
is a 16-year-old kid asking this.
Right.
This is I commend Andrew because he's thinking at a level that most experienced long-term deer hunters aren't at yet. So congrats to you, Andrew.
Yep. And I wanted others to hear the answer because maybe it'll cut down on some of the questions I get. And so how do I exit a stand when there's deer around in the evening? There's a lot of different things I've tried over the years. I've howled like a coyote, and sometimes that will chase the deer off. I've sat there in my stand, an hour or more past last shooting light just to let the deer clear. I've had people, I've used my cell phone to text my wife, or I think Terry might have picked me up in the stand a couple times on a truck or a 4-wheeler or something. Have someone come in, and as they're coming in on a piece of equipment or a motorized vehicle, they're going to chase the deer off and allow you to get out of your tree undetected. But it's just, I want to commend you for recognizing the need to get out of your stand without spooking deer. I think there's a lot of novice deer hunters that just bail out and chase the deer off, and you're not going to get away with that very many times, and especially with a mature buck. So there's really a no good answer, other than to try these things if possible. And like I said, maybe you got to just sit there and wait for those deer to move off an hour or so after dark, whatever it takes. The other question was about tree stand locations for this time of year. Food sources are good as long as it's deer that are not pressured whatsoever. The situation Terry described earlier, where these deer are coming out on the alfalfa field, well, it's a farm that only Terry's hunting. Now, it's not a big farm, but those deer have experienced no pressure on that alfalfa field, and that's why it works. If you are in a more heavily hunted area, if you're sharing a property with other people, you're on public land or whatever, then you got to try something different. You need to be on that transition zone between the bedding and the food. And the closer you can be to the bedding cover, the better off you're going to be. However, the trick there can often be getting into that stand because the deer are bedded there. So you got to be able to slip into that stand without those deer bedded close by detecting you. And in that regards, I'll say that more than once I've climbed up into a stand and pulled my bow up and looked around, and right there within 30 yards of my stand, I see the antlers of a bedded buck in the brush around my stand. It's a whole lot easier to do that early in the season when all the green leaves and foliage is on. It's also a lot easier to do it on a windy day. When the wind's blowing tree branches and everything and making noise, you can slip into your tree stand a whole lot easier that way. But I guess that's about the best I can do on that question, Terry.
The level of the question is really, when you find that
balance on your property. That's the secret sauce. That's what we're talking about. You can find mature bucks in a lot of places that aren't pressured, but the minute you go in and out, you're risking that. And, all these techniques that we talked about, what Don just said about driving somebody in on a piece of equipment, howling like a coyote. I've set a Fox Pro wireless predator call turned on the fence post about 65 yards away from my tree stand. And just in case when I walk in, and if something's out there, I can blow them out with it. But I don't want to do that every single night I hunt. Those things are kind of the one-off things. And I think it really gets down to, Andrew, the lesson that I had to learn is don't overhunt a spot and go in when your opportunity is right to kill a deer. And like tonight, for example, I'm not hunting because the wind's just not right for me to walk in and not blow my scent into the bedding area. So minimize the times you do it and have a plan in case it is, and then you'll find that you can do things with your property if you're able to manage it, whether it's corn, miscanthus, different ways that you can create access to get in and out. But now you're understanding a little bit better about why Don and I hunt the perimeter, giving the middle to the deer, and that we can kind of slip in from the sides and not go into the core. So he's thinking at a different level than most hunters are. So I commend him for that if he's already getting to that point.
Yeah, you can read the passion right in that submission that he sent. And Terry, before we move on to the next question, I got another topic I want to bring up. I forgot to even mention this to you.
Oh, surprise one.
Yeah, I might even, somebody sent me something this week and they wanted to, well, actually it was about the podcast. There was all kinds of submitted questions about that podcast and the guy bashing me. And somebody put on there, I'm hoping this gets you riled up because we all like that and we haven't heard that for a while. We want to hear one of your rants. Sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not going to get on a rant about that.
We're just a constant disappointment. We're a constant disappointment, people.
Well, I'm going to get on a rant here for a little bit. I had someone this week, the amount of correspondence that I get and Terry gets too is just through the roof. And I mean, I'm talking text, phone calls, social media messages, emails, you name it. And I'm talking, I bet over 100 a day. And
easy.
Someone this week, someone sent me something early this week, and it was when I was dealing with one of them negative issues. And I didn't reply right away. I seen the message, and I had a whole bunch of them at once, and I skimmed through them, and I didn't reply to this person. And a few days later, they sent me another message, and they raked me over the coals, basically with a bad attitude, telling me that they heard that I would respond to everybody and blah, blah, blah. I'm not what I portray myself to be, and just basically blasted me. And I told that person, I said, you know what? You need to unfollow me right now because I've got no use for your attitude. And then I left it at that. Folks, I promise you, I'm trying my very best to be cordial to everyone. If you send something to me and you get a 1 or 2 word answer, it's not because I don't appreciate you. It's because I just don't have time. And that one really got me fired up. It was sent at a bad time. And when I seen it for the second time, it was also not very good timing. And I just told the person to quit following me. Yeah, I just had no use for the attitude.
It's funny the amount of questions I get for you because they don't want to bother you about it, so they bother me about it. And I don't mean the bother in a negative way. It's just people are looking for advice, information, and we appreciate it. But in full transparency, it's getting to the point that Don and I are going to have to really take a step back and evaluate. We might have to hire someone just to handle our social media and our messages. Because I mean, it's we don't want to lose that personal touch with everyone, but there's a reason why other people that are in the public eye don't answer their stuff, and we're trying to do it, and now I get why they can't. It's just impossible, and if we don't answer, we get in trouble. If we're short, we get in trouble. And I try to be a good husband and father, and I'm not real good at it. But my wife gets a little bit aggravated when I'm still answering messages laying in bed at 1:30 in the morning. And so
Yeah. Well, and we don't want people to stop, that's not the reason that I even brought this up. It's just that I want you to understand it might take a few days to get a reply. And I don't even mind you reminding me if it's been a week and you haven't got a reply. I don't mind you reminding me. Just do not come with an attitude. Do not come with an insulting bad attitude, because you have no idea, what all we're dealing with.
well, it's we have to give first priority to our consulting clients and masterclass clients, because we actually we when we have you as a customer for the Higgins Outdoors side, we save your number in our phone, that when it pops up, we know that it's someone from the classes, because that's a commitment that we have for our customers that trust us with their property. And that has to be our first priority, because that's our job. That's what we're being hired to do.
Absolutely.
And those are Johnny on the spot. Everything else we try to get to when we can. But I'm really dreading that next step that we're going to have to be in, and that is, and my daughter helps me with my social media some, but when she does it, she'll disclose that at the beginning and say, hey, this is, I'm helping dad with his social media today, this is where you can find the answer, or I'll relay the message. But I won't lie, there's sometimes that social or Lester's Feet applications come in, and I know that they're from, a podcast listener or whatever, and they leave the number to call back. Those automatically go to one of the other board members, because when we deal with families and stuff, we need to separate talking deer hunting from that and get to the facts. So I don't even get assigned the ones that come out of here. But it is, again, we're not going to please everybody, buddy. It's simple as that.
We're doing our best, folks, and we appreciate the support.
Hey, Spinks from Quiet Cat here in our virtual showroom space, where you can connect with a product expert and learn all about our bikes, our accessories, and what makes Quiet Cat the leader in off-road electric bikes. Schedule a live session today by clicking in the link below or going to quietcat.com/meet.
So last question of the night.
Okay, this one comes from Paul Gould from Hermantown, Minnesota. He says, hello, Don and Terry. I love your podcast and I'm learning a ton. Keep up the Lord's work. When you report about Lester's Feet, it fills my heart with gratitude that God saw fit to bless my wife and I with 3 healthy kids to follow in my footsteps. I'm glad you cut through all the BS in the hunting industry. I hunt a property that holds several mature bucks that I get trail cam pics of, but I have had a hard time closing the deal on these bucks. When you guys get a pic of a target buck, how do you go about patterning them and knowing what tree you are going to kill him out of? Appreciate any insight. Well, Paul, more than anything, patterning a buck also involves patterning a property. So the properties I've hunted, most of them I've hunted for many years. And if a mature buck that I want to target shows up on one of those properties, I already know where to kill him at. The stands that I've got set, I can kill any mature buck that's on that property for the most part. So just because a new buck comes along doesn't mean I start from scratch and I've got to scrap all my stand locations and start over. What I need to do with an individual buck is determine what properties he spends his daylight hours on. And once I know that, I can look at a property and know where to kill the deer on that property. But I just need to know where he's spending his daylight hours, or a lot of his daylight hours. And when I know that, I can go on that property and I can pick the stand locations. And a lot of it's based on terrain, where it's pinched down. But also you got to remember, and I think this is the big one that a lot of people miss, is you got to realize that a mature buck uses his nose when he travels. He just doesn't waltz through a spot because it's convenient. He waltzes through a spot because it's convenient and he has a wind advantage. And if he doesn't have the wind advantage, all else is really thrown out the window, because he's probably not walking through on the day you're hunting. You got to give him the wind advantage, and in combination with the terrain features that funnel him down. And when those two things come together, you should be able to kill any buck on that property. I'm not saying you can go out on one given day and do it, but over the course of a season, you should be able to get him killed. So, part of it's the individual buck, and part of it's the properties that he stays on.
Yeah, I think that there's always ways. We've both posted pictures about what we've done to different properties and given ideas at. The Whitetail Master Academy that you have released on October 1st is a perfect example of illustrating this. It's real easy for us to comment about it and very difficult for the listeners to understand it. But with the 3D animation and aerial and drone footages that Steve Shields was able to capture for you, I think it'll make a whole lot more sense. There's things that you can always do on a property. I mean, I've talked about the runway and the corn. I've talked about scrape funnels, rope scrapes, all these different things, to where you can build terrain features when you don't have the topography to neck the deer down. And then it's a decision of when to hunt it. And when all of that clicks together is when we say that we can kill those bucks. I mean, literally, and it's not bragging, it's just a testament to how much I've tried to understand a lot of your techniques here in Kentucky. Being able to shoot on a small farm as I have, 3 different bucks over 5 years old every night I've hunted except for one. There's 2 reasons for that. I haven't hunted that much, only when the conditions are perfect, and the spots that I'm in, I'm able to get in and out without pressure and be in the right area. So it comes. It's not a light switch. But I think the best tool that you have, and I didn't mean for this to be a tee up, an advertisement of your Whitetail Master Academy. I don't have a thing to do with that project, but that's one of the things that's low hanging fruit for subscribers to be able to really understand your setups and how you go about setting up these properties for this exact question.
Yeah, and there's actually a section on there on tree stand strategy, and basically we've dissected some of my very tree stands where I've shot some of my better bucks, and we're showing the access from the air, how I'm accessing, what the wind is, and all that. But in my experience with hundreds of clients, it's my opinion that most deer hunters are able to pick out a good stand site. Where they fall short is on access and wind. Access and wind is key. You can have the best stand site in the entire woods, but if you don't access it right and you hunt it with the wrong wind, you're not going to be successful. And that was one of the reasons for doing the Whitetail Master Academy, is I get so many questions on access and on wind direction, how to play the wind. And by showing a property from the air, from showing exactly where that stand is at, showing exactly the path those deer are taking through animation, showing the access path and the wind, and how that wind is allowing that access. And then once you get in that stand, how that same wind direction is making that buck feel comfortable and allowing him to be on his feet in daylight. You're not expecting him to commit suicide. You're basically showing how he's playing the wind and how you are using that against him to get a shot at him. So that was a great tee up, Terry, for for that part of the Whitetail Master Academy. And for anybody listening, we went live with it yesterday, October 1st. So just go to whitetailmasteracademy.com, and there's a free sample video in each category to give you kind of a feel. There's also some written blogs that I've put on there as well, but whitetailmasteracademy.com.
Do you want to take your deer hunting success to the next level? Do you want to take your hunting property to the ultimate level? Don Higgins Whitetail Master Academy is a one-of-a-kind source of cutting-edge information to help whitetail hunters and land managers become more successful.
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the first 500 subscribers, we're going to do a random drawing, and the winner of that is going to be yours and my personal guest at a master class this fall, and be on the podcast with us, I believe.
Yeah, that's in March.
Yeah.
But yeah, and we're close to 500 right now. May even be at 500, but once we hit 500, we're going to have a drawing for that.
All right. Well, maybe I don't know how you're going to do that. We'll let people know. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just, when it all clicks, you become so much more confident in what the deer is going to do that it's a whole lot easier to make the decision. I'm not going to hunt tonight, or I'm going to pass that deer in not the right situation. There's a difference between being confident and cocky. And when you finally get it to where it clicks and you have a property set up, it's not as hard to make that decision as I don't need to hunt tonight, because you believe it so much. And it's been a long journey for me to get there. But I'm telling you, about 6-7 years ago, when it finally really clicked, the amount of matured buck sightings you have is just, it goes up to exponentially.
Right. You'll
But
start seeing
it takes a lot more work in the off season. It takes a lot more work in the off season. You're working more in the off season than you are hunting. No doubt about it.
But your buck sightings will definitely triple or quadruple from one season to the next when it all comes together and you understand. And that's what we're hoping these videos do. It helps everything click in somebody's head. And oh, now I get it. Now I understand. I've already got the good stand location, but I was accessing it wrong, or I was using the wrong wind. I need to use this wind. And, I just love hearing other people's successes when they give me a little bit of credit. Like, hey, I read a magazine article you wrote one time and it helped me kill this buck. Or, I watched one of your YouTube videos, and because of something I learned there, I shot this buck. And when those start rolling in, that's really gratifying for me.
The first time I saw you in a tree saddle with a sleeveless shirt and a crossbow, it made me a better hunter, Don.
Yeah, well, I don't think that day's happened yet. I guess you're not a good hunter yet because you ain't never seen that.
You're holding people back. That's the new thing is, Don, you're holding people back.
Well, if I'm holding anybody back, I apologize. I'm going to cut you loose right now, and you're going to have the best season of your life.
What'd you say to that guy? Unfollow me now.
I did. And I don't even know if it was a guy or a girl, really. I think his name was Jamie, and I'm not sure if it was a guy or a girl. It doesn't really matter, but the timing of their message was just terrible after all I'd been through last week.
Wrong place, wrong time, people. There's been many times where Don and I have had to talk each other off the ledge, and I'm just glad we have that. I'm glad we have that.
Me off the ledge.
Hey, I'm telling you, it was so bad that I didn't even tell him until tonight that I had a shot at that buck and screwed up. He didn't even know that, folks, until tonight. That's how bad of a week he had. I didn't even tell him about it because I think he knows how much I want to kill this deer.
I've never felt so low the day before season open. Usually, you're full of anticipation and excitement. Season opens tomorrow. this year, I was like, I'm ready for season to be over. I'm tired of dealing with this garbage.
And you have giant bucks that you know where they're at, and still feel that way.
And I've never sat in a tree yet.
So,
in fact, I don't even know if I'm going to hunt this week.
Well, I have to look at the weather. Like I said, I'm traveling up to New York for a few days, and if the weather is good, if you're not hunting, I know a place that I might need some help on this coming weekend. I'll solicit your services because we got pictures of a really good one that we might need to get our heads together on some access on a certain property that I'm new to. So if you're not hunting, you might be piling around with me all weekend next weekend.
Well, I can probably handle that.
All right.
Yeah.
Folks, in all seriousness, I appreciate your patience. Again, by no means are we perfect. We're human. We appreciate your support and appreciate your patience as we try to navigate us trying to do this platform the right way that we think not only glorifies God, but also makes the hunting community proud, even if it sacrifices our so-called status in the hunting industry, which Don and I really don't care about. So it wouldn't be possible without your all's positive encouragement. And I want to tell you, the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments that we got after making that statement this week means more than anybody ever knows to both of us. So we truly covet that.
Well said, Terry. The the good people that reach out to us, and whether it's asking a question or offering encouragement, is why we do this. We want to be servants of not only God, but of our fellow man, our fellow deer hunters. And, it's almost our mission, if you will, to help others. Our ministry is helping others. So I don't want anybody to take my earlier comments the wrong way and think that I want you to stop contacting Terry and I. That's not it at all. It's just I'm asking for a little bit of patience. Don't give me some attitude that I'm a terrible person because I didn't answer your question the first day I seen it.
Don's thumbs do not work as fast as a 4th grade girl, so he can't type that fast on this phone.
I'm lucky to see my phone, let alone type on it.
All right. Well, we'll touch base with everybody next week. Hey, if I come to Illinois, we can do the podcast in person live. So we'll keep everybody.
Probably get a group together to ask questions.
Let's see what happens, what the weather forecast is, and all you people that are local. I haven't seen the mailman lately.
I see him. I'll tell you what, I got the best mailman in the entire world. I live up a 1/4 mile lane, and instead of taking my packages down to the mailbox, I just text this guy and he picks them up in my garage. I just set them right there in the garage, and he comes and picks them up. I'm telling you, there's not a better mailman in the entire world.
Well, hopefully he's wearing a Chasing Giants hat that you gave him.
He should be.
All
I
right.
gave him a Real World hat too. I leave little things for him once in a while on the stack.
Well, if I come up, all you locals that are up there around Don's, if I come up, maybe we'll do a podcast. Saturday night, maybe?
Yeah, that'd be the best time because.
Well, we have to be careful of that because if I'm hunting an hour and a half away, I'm not sure if that's going to work. So we'll let everybody know if we do it. We'll just leave it at that.
Yep.
All right.
Sounds good.
Well, thanks, everybody.
God bless everyone. Have a great week.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, Buy a Farm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingrich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.